Buckeye Talk coming to you winter outside of the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. I'm Nathan Baird, along with Stephen Means and Doug Lesmerises from cleveland.com. We're talking about Ohio State's roster. It's pretty full right now. It's like overflowing. Somewhere in the low 90s right now, depending on who you ask, as far as the number of scholarship guys. They got to get down to 85 is the NCAA limit for in-season. Ryan Day today, though, said that's not a big concern of his. He'd be more worried if they were potentially going to be under 85 than he is being several spots over there. Stephen, how do you just sort of see this playing out, and how much of a challenge is this for a coaching staff to try to finagle that over the coming months and weeks?
I think spring is going to shed some light on a lot of players and whether or not they can actually play here. And that's maybe a harsh way to put it. And it's not necessarily, I'm not going to say they're pushing guys out, but if you get through the spring and it doesn't feel like you have a realistic shot of getting on the field here as an upperclassman, you're going to have to sit down and have a conversation with your family. Ryan Day just mentioned today when it was brought up about Sevyn Banks, and he's no longer with the program, and he was supposed to be having a conversation with him today. Who knows what that conversation is about, but I doubt that's the last upperclassman that had an opportunity to come back that he's going to have a conversation with sometime between now and June.
I mean, Doug, you've seen this kind of play out in the past. The thing that is the wrinkle right now, though, is the idea of the super seniors, the extra year that the NCAA granted everybody in 2020, and now there are guys who can still use that. The problem is last year they didn't count against the roster, and now they do, and you had kind of warned about that at the time. You were a bit of a visionary in the kind of crunch that would create. That's only going to apply to a couple guys on this roster, though, and I think as we were just discussing, you can already see some specific positions where there's just a ton of guys, and something's going to have to shake out between now and August.
I mean, it was news to us. It's like the first, a couple of names were thrown out at Ryan Day. Jaron Cage, Taraja Mitchell, say the USC linebacker's name.
Palaie Neatote the fourth.
And he was like back. So that's like three. It's like, okay, well, that's a lot of guys that are kind of hanging around that maybe you weren't 100% sure about. The other thing that factors into this is they're reshaping the defense. And beyond just like the normal competition that, Steven, you're talking about is like the even, as we saw like with a guy like Brendan White a couple years ago. Brendan White was like the defensive MVP of the 2018 Rose Bowl, the end of that season. 2019, it's like, we're only playing one safety now. And he was like, what do I? And it's like, your position doesn't exist. And he transferred records. And he was a good player for Ohio State. So I do think there's going to be some of these things where it's like, sort of like, no offense to you, player X, but we're not exactly sure how you fit in what we're looking for in different skill sets at different positions. Not that it's a huge change under Jim Knowles, but I think there's enough of those that I think it will exacerbate the thing that you're talking about, that there might even, they're going to have some guys transfer. I mean, like, it's like a riddle. It's like, how do you get from 92 to 85? It's like, well, they can either be abducted by aliens or they can transfer. But I think that'll become clear during spring football where guys figure out, man, I came here to be a strong side linebacker, and we don't do that anymore. Or I came here to be a certain type of corner that we don't do anymore, and that'll lead to some guys leaving.
Yeah, it's like it's not really pieces of a puzzle, because a puzzle pieces were, you start from one thing, you cut it up, and then you fit them back together. This is some other kind of a structure. It's like, you're a great piece of wood, but we really need a cement block here, and that's not what you are, and so you should go somewhere else that really needs the kind of piece of wood that you are. I'm really getting out in the weeds on this analogy, and it's cold enough. We should probably wrap it up. But listen to Buckeye Talk. We're going to have a lot to say about everything we heard today. And get the text, 614-350-3315 for intel analysis throughout the offseason here from Buckeye Talk.